a chat about autonomous agents, and I'll kind of lump everything together. Chatbots, conversational agents, assistants, all in the same category. Maybe, and just as introduction, so Anand was Chief Product Officer of Snapdeal, so many of you from India know who that is. Bharti Airtel, probably, I think the third largest mobile carrier in the world. And along with Dan Turchin here, was the founder of a very early on company in the mobile workforce and workflow management space. So we're pleased to have you. So kind of give us maybe just to start off with, give us a definition of assistants and chatbots.
Yeah, so I think at a super high level, the difference between sort of normal software and agents is there's maybe 3 or 4 things. Like one is they are reactive to the environment, they are goal-oriented, they are persistent, and then most of the time they are autonomous, like which is the whole topic that we're talking about. So these, I think the idea has been around. Right? I remember when I was in undergrad and we were doing our final year thesis, we were working on neural networks, and so the basic ideas have been around for over at least 15 years. I think the increase in sort of computational ability over the last few years, I think has sped up a lot of the fundamental what's possible on the AI side. And so again, you know, AI to me is like a horizontal technology. The idea that it can be used in combination with a lot of users and on use cases makes it super interesting. So I think those 4 things are probably what I would use to distinguish normal software versus autonomous agents.
Can talk a little bit, so you hear people talk about sort of conversation sort of replacing mobile apps, and so there's probably kind of a space for being mobile first and a space for being kind of conversation first. And it's very clear that in mobile apps you're dealing with all the kinds of things that people dealt with in on-premise software, just deployment and discovery, and I've got a lot of stuff that I never use. Give us a little bit of sort of your vision of sort of conversational agents.
So I think when any new platform comes into play, the temptation is to say that it's going to replace everything that is there today. And sometimes that does happen over a very long period of time. But my sense is that this will coexist with the existing platforms, right? Today, if you're a content developer or an app developer or a platform of any sort, you've got sort of 2 extremes, right? One is you've got the mobile web, where the user commitment is very low. They usually come in through like either search or social or some sort of a referral. They're not logged in, they don't have the payment information stored, and the friction to completing any sort of transaction or engagement is very high. On the other hand, you can install an app, you can make the high-end commitment where you've got a best-in-breed experience. You probably have your login information, you're logged in, and your information is stored, you've got your payment information stored, etc., and you're really ready to make a transaction, but it's a very high degree of commitment. And not to be like Goldilocks about it, but there is like an in-between state between these 2 extremes, right? Where it's neither very low commitment nor very high commitment. And you can have a pretty high degree of personalized experience without sort of downloading, an additional app or doing some other commitment. So we did a study late last year where we asked a number of consumers sort of about their usage behavior. And about 3/4 of them spent about 80% of their online time on 5 apps or less. And needless to say, there's a little bit of a self-serving study because 4 of those 5 apps are owned by Facebook, right? But the data was not, like the data was pretty honest, real data. And then just to be sure, we asked the same consumers, how many new apps have you downloaded in the last 30 days? And anybody want to take a guess for these people who use 5 apps or less to engage about 80% of the time. Zero new apps. And so I think if we notice our own behavior, we want to do more and more on the fewer and fewer apps that platforms that we're already on. And so that's an appetite that I think platforms are leveraging and developers are leveraging as well.
What's an example of outside of existing apps, social media apps and so forth? What do you think of as a sort of in the future of mobile first app that conversation can't really address?
So I think that it will be, we talked about the concept of an agent. I think like the notion of a good agent or an assistant or a concierge, if you will, is to know when they're not required, right? So the idea is that they will be invisible until they're needed. So the idea is that an agent will know you really well and will know where to add value, know where to support what you're doing, but not be sort of so present that they're almost annoying, right? Like we know those people in the real world, and they're not very fun to be around, right? They're like constantly pinging you. The hotels where like they show up at 6 a.m. to like clean the room and you haven't woken up. So like the notion of like a concierge is part of it is to be invisible when they're not required. So I would imagine like if let's say I'm trying to be quiet for a little bit of time, a good agent will actually know that. And know that they're not required at some point in time. So my sense is it won't be defined by whether they're a part of the experience or not. It's a question of what value they add in that experience.
So you have kind of two main types of sort of personal assistants, kind of chat driven and voice driven. And fundamentally sort of what fits where? When is voice better? When is chat better?
So, one thing I would say, now that we have a 2-year-old is like voice is very good when you're driving. You better not be chatting when you're in a car or when you need to pay attention to sort of real world, whatever you're doing there. But I would say, the nice thing about a conversational experience is that, I don't have to modify what I do to be understood by the system, right? So if basically I want to start a conversation by saying hello, like I can start by just typing hello, and I don't have to, particularly with accents and ambient noise and all these things, like you don't have to worry about being recognized and being interpreted. And
those are like solved, problems getting solved.
Yeah, so I would say the voice interface sort of largely makes sense if, let's say, you have a deterministic thing that you want to shoot for. For those of you who've checked it out, I apologize, but there's a new sort of experience on Messenger, which is like the Christian Grey bot. I always thought that you chat in order to like complete a certain transaction. I started using Christian Grey bot and I realized you can chat for the sake of chatting, and it uses AI to like handle a lot of the amazing corner cases. And I, for one, was like really impressed with like how they handle. Everyone tries to break a chatbot, right? Like so they handle some of those corner cases really nicely. Similarly, there is a coffee ordering app called Brew the Way, which is the first thing they do when you start the experience. They say, do you want to order coffee or do you want to like play the food and like break the bot? And depending upon what your answer is, the interface is different. And so like, I think with chat, I think it's a little bit more playful, it's a little bit more like real life. I would say voice is good when you're driving, your hands are not free, and you want it to be more deterministic.
Voice is also so very good if you're in a physical space. So you can imagine embodiments in devices, in your refrigerator, but also in kind of human-like robots.
Yeah.
But it's sort of kind of a command line type interface. Seems like it's stuck to a mobile phone. Instead, do you imagine sort of other ways to?
So I think there are interfaces coming up, many of which are in early stages that are launched, where there'll be voice recognition devices that are ambient, and they sort of based on where they are. If they're plugged on a refrigerator, they have a certain intent already. You're probably more likely to reorder food that is inside the refrigerator if the agent is near the refrigerator, as opposed to if you're in the bathroom and there's an agent over there, like you're probably ordering toilet paper or something like that. So I think like they will start to, like I said, become more ambient. But I think the interface is now, it's possible to have multiple interfaces. And I think, every time consumers have choice, they have embraced choice as opposed to saying that they only want one option. So my sense is, again, these choices will coexist. But I do like the fact that I can be asynchronous. So I think in the past couple of sessions we were talking about customer care. So customer care has become like a very common use case that people use chatbots for versus voice. The big difference being, like, if let's say I'm in the middle of a call and I'm on hold, or let's say I'm even in the middle of a conversation and I need to go grab something from the car. On chat I can do it asynchronously, right? I don't have to respond that second. Whereas on the phone, like right when I'm going to the car, they'll like stop putting me on hold and start the conversation, right? That's how it always happens, and I gotta respond right now. So I think the asynchronousness of chat is a benefit. Similarly, I don't have to share a lot of the previous context, right? Like the thread is always there, which is usually the advantage of chat, is that like if I've shared my account number and what plan I'm on and all those things in the past, that's beneficial for the person asking for the information and for me, in that it saves time for the agent and it's more convenient for me and more modern as an interaction experience. So we actually recently published a case study with Globe Telecom in the Philippines. So this is not just in the US, but a global thing, where Globe was able to increase its customer satisfaction by about 60%. By using Messenger.
Using Messenger.
So we're seeing some real case studies come out.
You have over 1 billion users, so you see a lot of sort of different use cases.
Yeah.
What are some of those use cases that you think are going to be big?
So the
customer support was one.
Yeah. So the nice thing about a platform at that scale. So before I get into the use cases, one thing that I wanted to share is that. So last year we started the year at about 625 or so million users in January, and a year later we are well over 1 billion users. So the last public number we shared in October, or late September, early October, was 1 billion. The growth has been quite good since then as well. Usually when you have user growth at any scale, let alone at that scale, it happens at the expense of usage, right? So the usage goes down when the users go up, and then you increase usage and the users go down, and that's the trade-off that you always go through. In the case of Messenger, during the time that the users went up to over 1 billion users, the usage stayed up quite a bit. So it's like well over even Facebook standards of engagement across the other apps. And so the nice part of that is that if you're a developer and you're betting on a platform, it's a very healthy business decision to bet on this platform because users are growing and so is usage, right? So leading indicators are that it's the right bet for you to go into, especially if you're raising like small amounts of money. You can't spread your bets too soon. And so if I were a developer right now, this is a very healthy bet to make. Within the construct of making that bet, we're seeing use cases across the funnel, if you will, like a marketing funnel. So at the super high level, people are creating awareness. Like we have a case study of Activision, who makes Call of Duty, the game. So they actually used a messenger bot as a companion when the game launched. And so they did this super interesting, think of it as like a sophisticated TV commercial that they did. It was purely to generate buzz and awareness, not necessarily for transactions or conversion. So what they did was they had a game that they launched on Messenger. And if you responded to a bunch of very in-depth questions about the game, you got an unlocked code that you could use to watch the trailer of the next game on Call of Duty. And for any Call of Duty fan, knowing what's in the next game is it's a huge deal. So we had about 6 million messages sent back and forth in about 24 to 48 hours. So it's a great sort of awareness generation use case. If you sort of move a little bit forward in the pipeline, people also use it to acquire users. So there's a use case we have of a French dating platform called Meetic. They realized this problem where when people signed up, they didn't usually a dating platform would ask you a lot of questions, right? Are you a man looking for women? What kind of, what's your preference? tell us a little bit about yourself, like upload all this stuff about, and people give up and because they're not getting anything in return for all the data. So they did this thing where they created an agent called Lara, who like welcomes you when you sign up for Meetup and sort of introduces you to the first 10 profiles. And so what the insight that they had was the moment people saw the first 10 profiles and liked what they saw, literally and metaphorically, like they sign up and give more information. So they use that insight to have a conversation with the consumer as opposed to intimidating them by asking too much too soon. So they saw a 50% increase in conversion from sign up to first action on Messenger as opposed to the other platforms. Similarly, so we talked about customer care, so I won't go through that again. The third thing that we saw is like products and platforms sort of moving some of that functionality to Messenger. So like as we speak, eBay is in the process of moving 1 billion listings over to Messenger. So if you're in a meeting and you want to like pretend to be still focused on everything, if you want to check something out on eBay, you could just message the eBay bot.
So you see kind of payments, commerce, other things moving.
Yeah, and so they actually have a payments integration as well. So in a couple of messages that you could end up buying what you wanted. So people, like I said earlier, people like for this to coexist with their other platforms, and they may see the images on a bigger screen, but if they want to pick a selection and buy, they might do it on the Messenger bot.
As a final question, we're running out of time. So people will, I presume, select a set of platforms, yours, or Line, Telegram, WeChat, or in the enterprise space, Slack.
Yeah.
What's the sort of hard problem that sort of startups have to solve?
I would say, one of the things that's getting lost in all this conversation about, whether chatbots are interesting or not, is that they'll only be interesting if they solve real problems, right? So whether it is a prosumer problem like expense tracking or something like that, or it is a purely consumer problem or something in between, I would say the first step is to like figure out what problem you're solving. And the way we think about Messenger is, it's really your customers who are on Messenger, right? It's really not Messenger customers. And they happen to be spending, close to somewhere between half hour and an hour every day on this platform, but they're really your customers. So let's say you're Absolute Vodka, right? The people who are on Messenger are customers of Absolute Vodka, and they should figure out how they engage with their customers. The only thing we define is like a high bar for what is spam. And so we have some guardrails for how people should engage on the platform, but it's really their platform and their creativity. And what I love is that they didn't build their whole platform onto Messenger. So they did this thing where they said, like, what's your favorite drink? And if someone said, no, I've never had vodka, they'll basically say, where do you live? If you're in this area, here's a bar where you can go have a free drink on us, right? And if you're on Messenger, you're probably out and about, right? You're not sitting next to your desktop and using Messenger the whole time. So they leverage the fact that that behavior is different on a desktop. So I think the true brands that will emerge. So we say internally that businesses will either be built or rebuilt on Messenger. So the eBay on Messenger could be eBay or it could be someone else. But the problem continues to be the same, that people will want to buy and sell stuff, right? So I think brands have a chance to either build or rebuild their products on a new platform. And that will be, regardless of which platform it is. And so I think it's a huge opportunity for people to kind of rethink either existing businesses or new business in that context.
Great. Thank you. And we're looking forward to this invasion of the bots.
Awesome. Thank you.
Next up, we have our partners from Verizon. You can't think of another telco that has been so much on the sort of forefront of driving change and innovation, and especially since they're in the midst of buying a company here in Silicon Valley. So